In today's episode, we're going to have a teacher take us to the most extreme places on the planet and introduce us to the bad girls of the Bible. Diane, it's such a pleasure to have you. You're such a fabulous teacher because you have this really wonderful background, which we're going to talk about at length, but you have these great classes. You actually went to Antarctica. Tell me just a little bit about going to Antarctica.
Oh, absolutely. You know, there's a cheap way and an expensive way to do this, and we took the cheap way. That is a princess cruise, and So
you went in style.
We did, but we didn't do what some do, is going with National Geographic or going with expeditions. And we just took a regular cruise ship, which you could do with other, Holland America, Celebrity, all kinds of things like that. And so we took a 17-day cruise, started in Argentina, ended up in the other side.
Okay.
And
You went around the Horn?
Yeah, around the Horn, ended up in, I have Chile in my head. I think it was Santiago, Chile. But it basically, going through the Falkland Islands and stuff, we ended up 4 days cruising slowly through the Antarctic Peninsula.
And so you have a class about this.
I do.
Is it like a travel log? Or?
Well, it is not. At the beginning, I called it cruising. The first class I did, I called it Cruising Through the Antarctic Peninsula. But I thought, this isn't a travel log. It's part of our experience. But I learned so many things, like it's our summer is its winter, because it's on an opposite pole.
Sure.
And I learned that, actually, it's more like only 1/100% of people in the world ever get to Antarctica.
So you're in some rare clubs.
Rare clubs, and they said to us, we had. Okay, the regular cruises don't necessarily have naturalists on board, but we had 3 or 4 of them or more. I mean, even our captain was like a naturalist at heart. And they said, you are now ambassadors for Antarctica.
Oh,
We
that's so
dub you
cool.
ambassadors. Go out and tell people this amazing place and how we need to keep it. We need to keep it pristine. We need to keep it so glorious.
Now, and there's a stereotype, because it is at the bottom of the world, that it's all, but you just said there's 2 seasons there.
Oh, yeah. But the summer season is 32 degrees.
Yeah. Balmy.
In the winter, though, you can't even have a cruise ship go down there because it's ice for a long, long ways. The sea ice needs to melt to be able to bring ships in.
Would ships coming in at that time, would that interfere with any of the penguin mating things?
It doesn't really,
okay.
No, because the seas are then open, and actually when the seas melt, they've got all this great algae and plankton and krill and stuff that's been locked in the ice, and it's just a free-for-all for orcas and, all kinds of whales and penguins and fish during the summer then as it's melting, because they're just getting
the buffet is open.
A huge buffet.
That's awesome.
And I told you too what I discovered, and I like to tell people the difference between the North Pole and the South Pole is that the North Pole is a body of water surrounded by continents, Russia, Canada, the U.S., Norway. The South Pole is instead a huge landmass surrounded by water. So they're totally the opposite. And that I find very fascinating.
If I'm remembering from elementary school, I think it counts as one of the continents, does it?
It is.
Yes.
It is the 4th largest continent. It's larger than Europe.
And so it's sort of an international thing, is it?
It is. It has an international treaty. I think it was in 1961 that they made an international treaty that this is not going to be owned by or taken by any nation. And they made a whole bunch of rules about, that the mining was they weren't going to do mass mining. They were not going to do mass fishing. We're going to take care of this place. And so a lot of the stations, the science stations that they have are run by different nations. They're not usually a whole bunch of nations working to get on a project together, but they do. They have to share everything they find in their studies and with everybody, and they will help each other in a difficult situation as well. But
sure, human beings got to help each other out,
and it's a really good example of countries working together.
And are you up on any of the research that they're doing down there? Any countries, any kind of research?
Well, I don't know about cutting edge, but a couple things that are really exciting, I think that they do is, first of all, they do core samples. They go down a long, long ways and get ice cores because the air gases that get trapped into the ice can tell about 1,000 years ago when they get down to those levels of what was going on with the climate and everything else, how things have changed over the years, smoke because of fires that maybe have come over it and all those kind of things. The other thing is that because in the winter, it's 24 hours of darkness, they have amazing cameras to do research on the cosmos. Some of their best cameras
wow.
and neutrino emissions and all kinds of things that have to do with space.
Don't they have like some caves that they've dug down in there so that the neutrinos can be detected?
They do, yeah. And they have sensors and stuff that they've put down.
Very delicate, very sensitive stuff.
It's really amazing. And of course, they're watching for climate change and the change in the ocean sea levels. There's a place called Thwaites Glacier that's on the west side of Antarctica that is a massive, massive glacier. But the waters, because it's a landmass normally, it's not melting as fast as the North Pole because the North Pole is water underneath, and so it has water rushing under it. But the South Pole is land mostly, and mountains and everything else. But the Thwaites Glacier, which is kind of like a bay area filled with it, they're finding that it's starting to actually separate from the land. But they're talking about it becoming a massive flood issue like 100 years from now. But they don't want it to become a flood issue 100 years from now either. So they're doing a lot of study with that. That's a primo place that they're looking at what's going on.
It sounds like an awesome class, but that's not
fascinating.
That's not the end of your expertise.
No, I wouldn't even call it an expertise. I went into the class with trepidation because it's not my wheelhouse. It's not where I, spend most of my time. I've been a Bible teacher for years. I mean, I was a nursing student, and I was in Nurses Christian Fellowship and did Bible studies, back in the 80s, and I've taught it for years, but I went to Africa and worked with a West African church and actually taught Bible classes in French. I've just been immersed in, I've just been immersed in teaching people. I love the stories of the Bible, the characters. And having lived in Africa, the culture I was in was not a big city. It was a rural community. And I thought, this world must be a lot like Bible times. I mean, I was learning the language, local language, and I had a language helper, and we'd go down to the well together and get water. And I thought, this is like the woman at the well, or just different kinds of things. And so I have a real fascination for pioneer women, for the African world or these more primitive worlds. The primitive is probably the wrong word, but a word that is less developed. And for Bible culture, I love the culture of the Bible. So I get really excited talking about.
They often talk about the either the New Testament or whatever. They speak of these as antiquity, the time of antiquity, and where life was a lot less complicated, perhaps, but
yeah, no Blackberries or Palm Pilots or iPhones there.
there you go. And so right, in some cases, I guess, right, whatever word we're going to use, simplistic or down to earth or whatever, but that doesn't mean that it wasn't fraught with all kinds of dangers. And one of the classes you're talking about, which I just love the title, makes me want to sign up right away. Bad Girls of the Bible.
Yes. Well, I almost brought the book with me. There's an author called Liz Curtis Higgs who's written Bad Girls of the Bible, Really Bad Girls of the Bible, and Slightly Bad Girls of the Bible. I have all three, and I also have videos of her talking at conferences of this, and I use clips from that. But she has a great sense of humor, and she has already put out, like the passage where it is and some, things we could learn from them. But she always says too, you might be surprised to find yourself in one of these bad girls or
you can relate.
Yeah, that you can relate to something about them. And it causes you to find a good example to follow or with them, many of them. A not so good example to try and avoid because it can get into a quagmire.
So who's your favorite bad girl? Or really bad girl?
Well, the one that's...
And does she have any friends?
Oh, my word.
Sorry.
But I mean, one of the worst of them that's fascinating to talk about is Jezebel.
Yes.
And people today will say, you Jezebel, or they won't, name their kid Jezebel. And that is a very fascinating woman. I mean, she's a very control freak, and she really, is just very interesting. And Athaliah is another one. And you probably never even heard of Athaliah of the Bible, but she actually went and killed a bunch of her sons and grandsons and great-grandsons and was trying to just wipe out everybody in the kingdom so that she could be queen.
Which book is this in? You're right. I've not heard of this one.
I'm trying to, oh, shoot. You would ask me that. I have it on notes somewhere here, but it's somewhere along the First and Second Kings or something like that.
Well, and like,
I think it's Second Kings.
If we can put ourselves in that position for a second, Jezebel, we might say she's a bad girl today, because she found herself on the wrong side. But it seemed like she earnestly believed in this other religion and was maybe going about proselytizing a little bit harshly. But right, if we could interview her today, what do you think she would say about?
Well, I think that she would say, I was protecting my own. I was protecting my kingdom. I was protecting my husband. And we want the kingdom to be successful. For her, I mean, she used the powers of Baal, that her father had been a Baal-like prince or something, and a king. And so she was definitely comfortable with Baal and all of that. But she would say, that she just wanted to have her husband happy, because a happy husband and a happy wife make a happy life. She would have said, I have these skills. I have good organization. I'm good at telling people what to do. I can see what it is and I tell them, and when you look at her, there are things, I mean, we're all a mix of good and bad, And so
nobody's perfect.
Yeah. So she definitely had some positive skills. She was a good organizer and got things done, and she was able to tell, hey, go, you do this, you do that, you do that. And so you can admire somebody like that, but she was also vengeful. And she... I
was going to say, if you got on her wrong side, you ended up dead.
Yeah, basically.
And that's maybe the kind of the brutality of the times that they lived in.
She also really treated her husband like a dish rag. She didn't, and that was...
I don't know anybody like that today.
She really, he was a henpecked husband type of guy. She just really told him, don't worry, honey, I'll take care of it, or here's what you should do. What do you mean you didn't, take out the
Awesome.
trash?
That's funny.
No, but anyway, we do. The thing is, okay, so they have a different culture, a different lifestyle, different period of time, and yet the issues of loving your family, wanting to take care of those in your charge, having a healthy life, all these kinds of things. I mean, there are so many things that we can find in common with these ladies of the Bible.
You're one of those rare individuals that can actually bring the Bible into the 20th or 21st century and make it relatable instead of thous and these and...
Well, I think we have to. What it really is, there are lessons we can learn that we take from that and say, okay, now what are the timeless truths that are transferable here, that don't change because God doesn't change? And what the message of it is, and I tell my class, I believe the Bible is true. I believe God exists, but I'm not going to tell you that you need to believe everything I do, but you need to know this is my premise. But I really do believe that there are things that are timeless truths that we can grasp from these lessons. So then we can take them and apply them to our situation.
And so you're like, when you were a missionary in Africa, how did they take to these kinds of teachings? Were they open to your perspectives on these things?
Oh, yeah, because a lot of times, what you do there is then apply it to their world. So it's not a thing where we're applying it to America and then applying it to them. You take it and you apply it directly to what situation they're walking through.
People are people.
People are people. I saw that. I had a lot of Japanese friends in college, and I went to Japan, and I saw one of my friends talking to her mother, and she's like, "Mom," and I'm just like, and it was all in Japanese, and I'm like, oh, this is so.
But you don't have to hear the words; you can hear the emotion and the.
And then I'm in Africa, and there's a little girl who is going, "Mom," and I'm just thinking, people are people.
Right.
It's human nature is human nature. And,
I think Patrick did that too for the Irish when he went up and he taught it at their level that they would accept it and understand it. And
he really did.
He didn't try to change them per se.
Did you know he was a missionary? That is exactly what it was. He was not Irish. He was from England.
Right.
And he found himself,
a Briton, I guess,
in a sense, he felt a sense of call to go and help them have an understanding of God.
And what a brave idea, because he was a slave there before he escaped. He was a
slave. And then there were many Druids and, others.
The Celts.
Actually, just even those in power who just really wanted to take him down too. And he was very brave.
Right.
But he really wanted it to matter for them, because when he was a slave, he wanted to go to the enslaved. He wanted to go to those who were down and out because he understood it's a hard life, but there is hope. And boy, he's written some beautiful things, that just are really strengthening for the, deep inside. We don't see that when it's time for St. Patrick's Day. We hear all about green beer and parties. But really, honestly, he was an amazing man who wanted the Bible to be relevant, and that's a concept that we need to know for our own lives today.
So you as a missionary are still working in that vein, if you will.
I think so. I think that is really important for us today. I mean, how do we take a story about Jezebel and make it relevant to our lives,
That's awesome. Well, and then is there another class? Did I understand you correctly that you're
Yeah.
telling me about your other class that you're doing?
Well, I'm doing Bad Girls of the Bible in 3 parts because there's so many of them. There's 21 of them I'm doing. So I'm doing 7 each time. So
Are they bad girls or did they just get bad reputations?
a little bit of both. The very last class I'm doing is more like a moment that changes everything. And like one of those examples would be Lot's wife. She turned for one moment.
Oh,
and it changed everything, you know? So anyway, but actually, okay, so I'm doing 21 of those women in 3 different classes. And some year I might do a cycle where it's all in one year to just, if somebody wants to go from one to the next. But another class I've done is called Bible Overview, and it basically 66 books. But this is a book that everybody hears of. We quote, I mean, Star Trek quotes the Bible. So many places do, like you quote Shakespeare. So what's really in it? And how do you get through all the, historical books and all of that? What about Leviticus? That's all laws. And so this takes it like a flyover. My husband, military, Air Force, and we talked a lot of times. We lived in houses where you had a flyover of jets constantly. And I say this is a flyover of the Bible, where in 7 weeks we cover the whole thing. And we can only spend a little bit on each one, but it gives us a big picture of what it's all about. I love doing that.
That sounds awesome. Is there like an account or a moral teaching or something from the Old or the New Testament that speaks to you personally before we wrap it up?
Absolutely. I think it's just amazing that there's a God that cares about me. And I think for me, the favorite part of the Bible is the book of Psalms. And there are just so many things in there where David or the psalmist, there's a couple of people who write the book of Psalms, but they'll say, I was in distress. Psalm 42 is one of them. I was in distress. And it's the sense of hopelessness, and sometimes you look at him and you say, he's so real. And yet he always comes back, the psalmist who always comes back to say, but I will choose to trust in him. I will put my faith in him. And we just sometimes need, and I tell my folks, glean something from this book that is going to encourage you today. Because for me, it's every day where we just need a little hope. We need something to hold on to. And I find my strength for every day coming from that. And I need to, because every day has its own challenges.
And I think David was inspired by a lot of that wilderness adventure that he was on.
Oh, yeah.
And I think many of us in our day-to-day lives, we get into a metaphorical wilderness.
Oh, absolutely.
And everyone knows that 23rd Psalm, the
Yes.
Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want.
Yes.
But you can see David's dilemma.
Yeah.
Because the 22nd one is, my God, why have you abandoned me?
Forsaken me. Yes.
Exactly. And
abandoned. That's what I mean about his raw emotions, the very real emotions. But it always comes at the end to say, but I
trust.
turn my trust in you, and so it's a matter of recalibrating your eyesight, so to speak.
Oh, there you go. And I think that's what's one of the things that makes it so relatable. Thank you for doing that, because right, these kinds of things we are going through these circumstances in our lives, or whatever we're going to call them all the time, and we're not always sure what to do about it. So
that's right.
Keep going.
Okay, thank you so much. Thanks for having me, Ted. I so appreciate what you're doing with these podcasts.
Diane, it's a pleasure to meet you again, and I'll see you soon.
Okay, thanks.